Europe has a rich and deeply rooted religious heritage. Its unique buildings, tranquil spaces, and exquisite artifacts encompass the diversity of European culture and identity. This religious heritage is an invaluable resource that is handed over to us for all generations to enjoy. It is all around us and an integral part of our lives and communities. It includes rich cultural traditions, masterpieces of art, wonderful craftsmanship, and extraordinary music. In an era of globalization, cultural heritage helps us to remember our European cultural diversity, and its understanding develops mutual respect and contributes to dialogue amongst different cultures. The future of religious heritage presents us with challenges and opportunities. Knowledge transfer and innovation will be needed to hand over this remarkable patrimony to future generations, from the creative reuse of historic buildings to educational opportunities, from both real and virtual tourism to strengthening communities. The value of religious heritage is almost limitless. It is up to us to make the most of its potential. Since 2011, Future for Religious Heritage, a European network, has brought together charities, conservation experts, governmental, religious and university institutions, as well as other professionals. FRH is a non-faith, not-for-profit organisation that draws its strength from its diverse network. Our mission is to understand the challenges facing religious heritage, as well as the opportunities it presents to develop solutions for the 21st century. Our ambition is to maintain a network of European organisations with a strong structural framework for ongoing intercultural exchanges regarding the protection, conservation and management of religious heritage. This network is open to you. Please join us now.
Dear participants of the 4th Hybrid Conference on Living Religious Heritage, I am sending you from Cantabria a warm welcome to our ultimate and final part of our biennial conference with the title Continuity in Care and Safeguarding, a task that has implied enormous effort and commitment for nearly 2 years. Although how wonderful it would have been to be able to see each other face to face, I have to admit that thanks to technologies we can carry on. Hopefully next time we can meet physically and with all the experience we've acquired by now, which is great since our conferences will be hybrid in the future. So in this precise moment, the year of our 10th anniversary, I thank you very, very much for your support, for your shared beliefs, for helping to create a social change towards the rich religious cultural heritage of Europe. So wherever you are, thank you for being here today representing your institutions, your organizations and bodies, or just yourselves and your values. This is togetherness, cooperation, and bringing the richness of our beautiful differences and our amazing commonalities. This is what FRH stands for. For those of you who are members of FRH, I will convey the same message of our assembly. Let's keep on showing it in our everyday life. Anytime you celebrate an event in which your religious cultural heritage is involved, please use the logo of FRH. Please send the office the event so that we can all spread it and follow it. And add our logo in the signature of your mails. Please check your website, FRH website, the beautiful initiative on the Run for Heritage, of which the European Commission is well aware of, and follow the lead of Cantabria region in the north of Spain with 300 kids of mountainous area. They are involved so willingly, passionately, or the city of Orihuela in the Mediterranean Spain, where soon more than 1,000 kids will be participating. If you have 10 or 12 participants ready to run from one building to another, showcasing your local religious heritage, just contact our office and let's set up a small run. I can see small runs spread around Europe, showcasing the joy of having these magnificent buildings and as repositories of European identity and culture. And for those of you who are not members yet, make the most of this gathering to join in this big family that is growing and growing with individuals and institutions spread in more than 35 countries, and participate in our activities, which will be yours as well. Remember, the more we are, the stronger we will be. One by one, we are mortal. Together, we are eternal. I borrowed these words from Apuleius back in the 1st century. Together, we are creating a social change. FRH is where people meet religious heritage, in the heart of Europe. We are the voice of religious heritage in Europe. As Roman said, sursum corda, hearts up. And this is what gathers us together, pursuing the same goal, the continuity in the function or use of these magnificent buildings, in the connection and dialogue of the communities, and in evolving the cultural expressions, and in the care and safeguarding of the religious heritage of Europe. Now I leave you to Lilian Kreutzwagers, our excellent moderator of the day, founding member of FRH, former secretary of the council, and current president of the advisory board of FRH. Please, Lilian, the ground is yours.
Good afternoon to all. I'm Lilian Kreutzwagers, your day chair today, and we are broadcasting from the Silver Square Bailly studio in Brussels. I have the honor and the challenge to take you through this final of our 4 hybrid events. A live studio broadcast has a lot of challenges, we already noticed, consisting of international online contributions and a panel of experts in the studio to reflect on them. Well, to be honest, a panel, it's only the 2 of us, because the other ones were stuck in traffic. Although living in Belgium, reaching the studio in Brussels is very hard today, also due to COVID restrictions. I am very pleased to notice that even though we have these technical difficulties at the start, we have so many participants and panelists via the chat. The chat box today will be moderated by FRH manager Jordi Malarach. With me in the studio is Madina Benvenuti, founder of MAD in Europe, the first craft dedicated pan-European portal and respected member of our working group on today's topic. Marcus van der Meulen, our architect and researcher at the Faculty of Architecture in Aachen University, which research field is specifically the reconstruction and conservation of religious heritage, just called us that he is stuck in traffic and is trying to speed home to tune in digitally. And also we have Jan Jaspers, who is online, who is with us today online, and this was announced due to COVID restrictions. Jan is the former director of Parcum. He developed, amongst others, the system of church policy plans for the Flemish region, in cooperation with the Flemish Heritage Agency and the Belgian Bishops' Conference. He is, amongst others, advisor of the Belgian Bishop Conference for the future of parish churches. Jan is a well-respected member of Future for Religious Heritage, sits on the scientific committee, and was responsible as co-chair of the FRH Conference Committee for organizing these 4 hybrid events. So, there was a lot of information, but it clearly shows we have a variety of expertise in the field in our panel to steer the discussions today on the topic of living religious heritage, continuity in care and safeguardings. Over 1.5 years, the working group on the topic of continuity in care and safeguarding, consisting of experts and students from all over Europe, had several online meetings to discuss and reflect on the topic under chairmanship of Jennie Hawkes. Jennie will share the output of the group later in the program. We have divided the contributions today in 4 teams. The first 3 contributions will focus on maintenance and conservation, a sustainable and secure future. It's such a privileged position to be part of FRH, a European network, as this gives us all the opportunity to learn and share knowledge, and there is a lot to learn from each other. The 3 first contributions will give us insights in different approaches to the topic of sustainable and secure future. At first we will see Sofia Laurin, the Director General and Head of Division for Culture Heritage and Living Environment at the Ministry of Culture in Sweden. She will give us an insight in the legislation on cultural policies, 2017 Bill on Dynamics of Heritage, using old legislation with new perspectives. The second video that we will show is Stijl Verenogen, the General Director of the Monument Watch of Flanders. He will introduce how this Monument Watch works in Belgium. And last but not least, the young generation, students of the Estonian Academy of the Arts, will talk about cultural heritage and conservation. Let's start. Do not forget, send your questions and recommendations and comments in the chat in order for us to bring them in the panel discussion. Could I please ask you to start the first video?
Ladies and gentlemen and colleagues, I would like to begin by thanking Future for Religious Heritage for inviting me to speak at this conference event. It's an honor. My name is Sofia Laurin, and I'm Director General and Head of the Division for Cultural Heritage and Living Environment at the Ministry of Culture in Sweden. My division is responsible for issues regarding the cultural heritage, for example, preservation of the ecclesiastical cultural heritage. The theme of this event, continuity in care and safeguarding, is as relevant in Sweden as in the rest of Europe. In Sweden, a living religious heritage is very important. The estimated number of places of worship in Sweden are 5,500, and a vast majority of these, 3,400 places, belongs, or 61%, belongs to the Church of Sweden. Other places of worship belong to, for example, other Protestant churches, Catholic churches, mosques, and synagogues. In this presentation, I will concentrate on the ecclesiastical cultural heritage belonging to the Church of Sweden, and I will sometimes refer to it as the Church. The reason is that the state has a special relationship to this cultural heritage as a result of the Church's societal role through the age. The ecclesiastical cultural heritage in Sweden has been built up over almost a millennium and is found in almost every place in the whole country. It reflects an essential part of society's history and growth, both at a local and a national level. Until the last century, the Church has not only been associated with the religion itself, but equally with central social institutions such as healthcare, schools, but also a population registration. The Church was the center of the local community and a natural meeting place for all Swedes. In the year 2000, the Church and the Swedish state was separated from each other. The Church of Sweden is since then no longer a state church. Since then, the Church of Sweden is the owner of the most of the churches and environments that are part of that cultural heritage and has the responsibility to care for its management. But as a common heritage, it still belongs to us all, regardless of being members of the Church or not. The responsibility of the heritage is shared between the Church and the state. And Sweden now has a system where the Church receives an economic compensation from the state with the aim to make it possible for the Church to preserve the ecclesiastical cultural heritage in accordance with the Historical Environment Act. The compensation also includes requirements that the churches must be kept accessible for all citizens and that the Church must have the competence needed for the management and administration for this heritage. Since 2010, the compensation has been 46 million euros annually. Every 5 years, the government evaluates the use and effects of the given compensation. And the last evaluation was done in 2019 as a written communication from the government to the parliament. For more than 10 years, the objective for the Swedish culture policy concerning cultural heritage has been to promote a living cultural heritage that is preserved, used and developed. And in practice, the Church of Sweden has also followed this objective in its work to preserve the ecclesiastical cultural heritage, even though the Church and the state are separated. Local involvement and close connection between conservation and active use have been and still are important part of the Church of Sweden's management of its buildings and environments. The work that they have done can also be an inspiration for the entire cultural heritage sector in Sweden. With its music, arts and church buildings, the ecclesiastical heritage is a living cultural heritage in its true sense. It's constantly evolving and being shaped when people use it. The Church of Sweden is facing challenges as the number of members decline. This can of course affect both the preservation and accessibility of the cultural heritage, but there are also opportunities in these changes. A church building that the parish may call redundant does not have to be sold out. Instead, the church can be the arena for an extended use that will make the ecclesiastical heritage even more living and dynamic. The ecclesiastical cultural heritage is found in almost all places in Sweden, both in cities and in the countryside. Even in places where there are no other public spaces, there is a church. There are many good examples of local communities where the church has become a meeting place for everyone. The church can then have several activities in the same building, for example, cafe business or activities for children. The church rooms are also leased for gatherings for organizers other than the Church of Sweden. But there are those who hesitate to use the church rooms and church environments in new ways. But not everything is as new as we might think. The church has experienced many times of change, and the church rooms have also changed. This has always been a part of the church's long continuity. In the latest of the government's written communications, the government therefore affirmed the church's work to find new or developed use of church rooms, as long as it can be done within the framework of the Historical Environment Act. It is our common responsibility not just to preserve the cultural heritage, it must also be used and developed to continue to be a living heritage and a concern for all. The preconditions for preserving the ecclesiastical cultural heritage are not only about funding. It is our common responsibility to make this heritage a matter for people so that knowledge grows, interest increases, and future generations can continue to enter a church and marvel. Thank you all for listening.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Tijl Vereenhoven. I'm the coordinator of Monumentenwacht in Vlaanderen, Belgium. In this talk, I will give you a short introduction of our activities about the safeguarding of religious and other immovable heritage. But first, let's see some of our workers at work. So the people you saw in the movie were some of the more than 60 what we call Monumentenwachters, monuments watchers. Our organization Monumentenwacht was established in 1991. So this year we celebrated our 30th birthday. We focus on the preventive conservation of immovable heritage because we think prevention is better than the cure. So we try to help owners of historical buildings to prevent the large costs that are involved with restorations by giving care for their building on a daily basis. So on the short term, we want to prevent the decay of the buildings. On the long term, we also want to raise awareness about the importance of preventive conservation for our heritage. This slide shows some key statistics. We are a member organization, so people can become a member on a voluntary basis if they want to use our services. So currently we have more than 3,000 members. And in total, that means that more than 7,500 objects or buildings are actually taken care for by our organization. As you can see on the right, these buildings are not all of them religious buildings, but still 40% are churches, chapels, and so on. So it means that the majority of churches in Flanders are a member of our organization. Thanks to the subsidies of the provincial governments in Flanders, our members can have fees that are very low. Actually, the annual subscription fee is 40 euros, and the inspection fees, they are 45 euros per hour. On the picture on the left, you can see how our material looks like. You can see the van with all of its contents, the material like leathers, ropes, and so on. So these materials are used for our daily activities, and it means the inspections that are carried out. So this is actually the basic work we do, and these inspections are written down in extensive reports with advice for the owners of the historical buildings. What we do is actually a visual condition survey. So it means we inspect all sides of the buildings, outside, inside, where we also focus certainly on the parts of the building that are not easily accessible for the owners. For instance, the roofs. We have a very detailed way of working, so we try to find out all the problems that can cause problems on the longer term and can lead to a decay of the building. For example, places where water can enter the building and so on. To access all these remote parts of the building, our people are trained in industrial rope access techniques, so they can see all parts of the building and from the ropes. But of course, it's not used for all the buildings, mainly for the larger buildings. When we discover some problems, first in general, we write them down in the report, and we give advice to the owners to find professional help to solve these problems. Of course, if we have some minor issues, smaller things that we can solve ourselves while we are on the building, we will do this urgent repair interventions ourselves. And next to the general inspection work, we could also deliver some specialized services to the owners if this is necessary. For example, the crack measurements, we can follow up these and write some reports about it. So all of these observations are written down in very extensive reports, focusing on the advice and the recommendations we give to solve the problems. So we make it very clear with pictures and plans, so people know where are the problems, what are they, and how they can solve them. Our reports also contain an overview of the recommendations based on the priority and on the advice we give. So they can make actually a planning over the next 10 years, which works they will carry out. And so they also can control their budget. A short quote by one of the members of one of the church boards. It's in Dutch, but it's a short translation. So he says that the work of Monumentenwacht is extremely valuable for this church board, and they consider the reports of our organization as a manual for the safeguarding of the church. In recent years, we also did some work about the condition scores. So this is a nice example of a map of Flanders with the indication of the condition of all the churches that are member of our organization. You can see that well, almost half of them are in good or very good condition, and the other half still has a worse condition. And last thing that that is important for us is the the raising of the public awareness about the importance of preventive conservation. People know a lot about restoration works and the big projects, but we want to stress that the daily conservation, the daily care for the building is really important to give them a long life. We do it by writing publications, by being present at events, giving explanations to people. We organize online webinars and so on. So this was a very short introduction. If you want to learn more, you could visit our website at monumentenwacht.be, which is mainly in Dutch, however. Or you could follow some of our social media. Thank you very much. Good afternoon.
Kuna ma olin esimesel aastal just lõpetanud bakalaureuseõpet, minu kõige suurem kogemus juba mingite skulptuuridega oligi kirikutes käimine, nende nägemine niimoodi kaugelt. Aga mitte see, et ma reaalselt ise nagu oma kätega millelegi niimoodi juurde lähenema ja teda siis uurima hakkaks. Ja seetõttu see loomulik nagu ärevus käis selle asja juurde. Ja siis, kui Vigala kirikusse, kui ma jõudsin, siis uksest sisse astusid, siis avanes selline pilt, kus vahekäigus olid pingid, pinkide peal olid skulptuurid ja siis sa kõnnid mööda ja siis sa saad nagu seda meisterlikkust ja kõike seda vaadata reaalselt lähemal, kui sa võib-olla oleks elu sees seda altari peal või altari juures olekul siis saanud.
Minul käed värisesid, kui ma pidin selle kujuga erinevaid protseduure läbi viima. Aga siis asi lõppes sellega, et nüüd siis aastaks 2020, ma arvan, siis toodi ta EKA-sse ning komisjon, tuli kokku suur komisjon, kus siis osalesid muinsuskaitse, siis meie õppejõud. Otsustasime, et oleks ju tore, kui Eestis oleks üks skulptuur, mis oleks siis, näeks välja selline, nagu ta baroki ajastu välja nägi, ehk siis polükroomne, ilus, roosa ja rõõsa. Ning siis mina olin see tudeng, kellel oli võimalus siis selles tööprotsessis osaleda ning ka luua siis sellest oma bakalaureuse töö. Ning võib-olla kõige vägevam selle juures on tegelikult see, et risti pealt nendest otstest me leidsime 4 maalingut, 4 evangelisti ning Eesti mõistes leida figuraalmaalinguid on üsna haruldane. Ning see oli ääretult põnev, ääretult lahe kogemus.
Kõige ilusam ja kõige toredam osa nendest oli kohtumised kogukonna ja koguduste liikmetega, kes olid peaaegu igal pool tohutult huvitatud ja käisid ekskursioonidel seal ja lihtsalt astusid sisse niimoodi mööda minnes ja tuurid, et kuidas teil nüüd läheb ja tegi see kohalike inimeste tugev side nende teostega, mis järjest tugevnes selle projekti ajal, sellepärast et ka mõnes kohas, kus võib-olla varem nii väga ei teatud, et mis kujud need seal täpselt on, oldi harjutud, et mingid inglid seal altari peal on, aga et kes täpselt tegi ja mida nad täpselt tähendavad ja kui olulised nad meie kultuuriloos on. Ja kui siis teada saadi, et need huvitavad teadlasi ja ajakirjanikud tulevad kohale ja pildistavad, siis kuidagi oli näha, et selline kõrvust tõstetud tunne oli inimestel. Tegi suur rõõm oma kodukoha pärandi üle.
Okay. Thank you. We are live again. Interesting contributions which give different insights, for sure stating the illegality of non-maintenance of protected religious heritage is a very good way of ensuring buildings are cared and are regularly maintained. Models as Monumentenwacht in Belgium, which is responsible for regular checkups to support owners in building a balanced maintenance model, are important. I want to address, because we have these technicalities and we do have only one panelist in the room, I want to address a question to all of you and to contribute via the chat. What role do you think that FRH could play in encouraging maintenance and conservation of religious buildings? Please put your recommendations in the chat, because we will gather them and they are beneficial to all of us. Now I turn to Madina. Welcome. How important do you see education and training for young people to be? And how can this be achieved, Madina? The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Lilian, and thank you very much for inviting me. It's very nice to see young people so enthusiastic about restoring cultural heritage, indeed. I think there are three very important points. The first one is that I think there is a need to change the society mindset towards crafts, because crafts have been closed into second choice careers. They have quite a bad image today, and we have to remember that craftspeople are experts of our heritage, so we need to give this back to them and put them back into the society. Also because crafts embed values like sustainability, diversity, they represent the richness and diversity of the territory, so they are really so important for our future cultural heritage. Then I think there is a real urgent need to map crafts all over Europe, because when you speak, for example, about stone cutting, stones are not the same all over Europe, and the techniques are not the same, and the climate is not the same, the cultures are not the same. So it's very important to keep alive all the diversity of techniques that we have all around Europe. And first we need to map them, and especially focus on the endangered one, because for some professions there are only few people left doing this work, and they are retiring. And so what's going to be next? Because that's a huge problem. And the third point is precisely this one, is that we have to identify highly skilled professionals and involve them more in the transmission of skills to next generations. We made a survey among craftspeople. 67% said they have no transmission plan.
67%.
67. So it's quite, I mean, it's crazy, because if they retire in 20 years, what are we going to do? I mean, so we really need to do something. We have to involve them in this transmission, which is a bit of a problem, because the paradox is that they are very busy today. Mm-hmm. There is a lot of demand, so why should they take time to train young generations? They come, sometimes they quit before the end of the training. They have a lot of rules, security issues, and so on. It's time consuming, so they cannot do their work because they have to train. So there is a need of incentives for these craftspeople who have a treasure in their hand and who can transmit it. In France, there is a very good system, les maîtres d'art. It's really supporting craftspeople who transmit the knowledge, but we need to really reinforce this on a European level. We need to also help schools, because there are less and less schools. For example, in basket making, there are only 2 schools all over Europe, but we know basket making is a very sustainable technique, dealing with local materials. And so it's very important that people can continue learning this. So this is really important, to help schools to create synergies, to create bridges between schools, to incentivize non-formal training in workshops. And so I think there's a lot to do, and it is urgent to do it.
I have an additional question, Madina. Do you think that on the European level there is attention for this lack of, for this gap that is going to be existing or that we are facing in the future?
Actually, I think yes. Madina just started 6-7 years ago, so I don't know. I cannot compare before, but I see many things coming also in European programs. There are a lot of calls, for example, to support the cross sector.
So just to explain to the audience, because you are full in the Brussels scenery, I understand. Yes. So calls to support the sector are calls for applications to bring in projects ideas.
Yes.
And they are related to different programs, to different EU programs.
Absolutely, yeah. Okay. It's true. So there is a wish, we can feel there is a wish to bring more sustainability in our future way of building and to bring help to the crafts, traditional craft sector, because precisely they are embedding European tangible, intangible heritage, and they are embedding sustainable values as well. So I can feel there is a will. Now it's quite sometimes hard to know how to participate to these European projects. I'm discovering it too, and it's not always easy, but there is something happening. Yes.
Okay, so we as FRH, we have the working group D, and you were part of working group D of today's working group. So you are already developing together with our members newer project ideas and trying to approach different programs. Because to be honest, this is also what FRH is all about. Joining forces, trying to bring this on the agenda, but also establish new projects, because we will all benefit and the entire sector will benefit. Therefore, we are also very pleased that we have now this liaison through this working group with Magnant Europe.
Yeah, I can add, in fact, that the cross sector is so fragmented that, and sometimes there are micro enterprises of 1 or 2 people. So there is absolutely need to create bridges, because by themselves they cannot. They don't have digital skills. They don't have entrepreneurial skills. They don't. Sometimes they need help to step into the future, to integrate innovation. So there is also a need to coach cross people to step into the future. Yeah. And this is really important to create all this network where everybody can help each other.
Yeah, and that's exactly what FRH is all about too, because when we started, we are now in our 10th year anniversary, as everybody might know, but when we started we were only a few people and there were a lot of different disciplines. As religious heritage is of course interdisciplinary, it needs an interdisciplinary approach. So thank you, let's move to the next topic. Thank you, Madina.
Thank you, Lilian.
Protection and preservation of artifacts. Religious heritage is of course not only the buildings, but for sure also the interiors and pieces of art. The tangible and intangible. In many different ways they can be a source of inspiration. Liesbet Kusters, curator of the Parkum Leuven, Belgium, will tell us how they use religious heritage as a source of inspiration and an invitation to dialogue for everyone. And Canon Ludo Collin, the director of St. Bavo's Cathedral of Ghent in Belgium, will inspire us with the innovative approach they took while safeguarding the world-famous mystic lamp masterpiece. Please start the videos.
Good afternoon, I'm Liesbet Kusters, curator at Parkum. And Parkum is a museum and a center of expertise for religious art and culture. And we believe that religious heritage is a source of inspiration and an invitation to dialogue, reflection for everyone. So that's the point of view we work on. We are located in a very beautiful abbey, an heritage site. It was an abbey, a Norbertine abbey from the 20th century in Leuven, near to the city of Leuven in Heverlee. As a museum, we work on 2 sites. At the first site, we have the Abbey of Park. It was the historic site was recently restored and last summer for the first time made accessible for public. And now we show a route, the heart of the Abbey, where the visitor can follow in the footsteps of the Norbertines and walk through the heart of the Park Abbey. And step by step, the visitor will discover the long history of the Abbey its inhabitants also see the historic rooms, the masterpieces, so you will discover the heart of the Abbey site. First of all, the showpieces of the Abbey are the heart of the cloister, with two stained glass panels. We also have the refectory, and together with the refectory, we also have the library with 17th century stucco ceilings. So they are very beautiful and unique in Flanders. And also the room where the abt lived, so his own apartment, actually. And these are the rooms we have now to show to the public, but in 2025, we have the finish of the restoration. And now the challenge is to think how we are going to present the site with all his layers, historical layer, the spiritual layer, the economic layer, to a public. And with an actual relevance, not only as a museum as such, but also with significance in the world today, for the visitor today. So we have to think about the experience when you visit the site, and not only an historic museum. So that's the challenge we are working on at this moment. Next to our work in the Park Abbey as a monument itself, we have our own thematic exhibitions. And the exhibitions we work through are at the Conference of Religion, Art and Culture. We work there with often unseen heritage of churches, abbeys and monasteries. A lot of these places now in Belgium are closing down. So it's very important for us to show the public the masterpieces that are still in the churches, and we are looking for a place to conserve and present them now. The exhibitions are kind of a witness of the rich culture of religious heritage we have in Flanders over the past 15 centuries, but also to think about what is the significance of this heritage in the world today. Because now we have a multi-religious world where we're living in today, and highly diverse society. And we have to think, what is the relevance of the religious heritage in this world? And we think that we have to see the heritage as a point of departure to promoting dialogue and reflection in a very diverse society. Next to a museum, Parkum is not only a museum, it's also a center of religious heritage expertise. And Parkum offers advice, specialist advice to the owners and managers of public and private owners of religious heritage. And advices on all kinds, on all different aspects that are connected with religious heritage. Advice on the collection, for example, but also practices, traditions that are connected with the heritage. And for example, also the future of the buildings, of the church buildings that are closing down. What are we going to do with all the buildings? The aim of Parkum is to preserve the heritage in its original context, in the place where it belongs. That's our first goal we are working on. But there are, of course, a lot of challenges. We have the challenge of perfect climate conditions, safety, all things about the right presentation, for example. So sometimes it's not possible to have all the heritage in its original place in the churches and the cloisters, also because they are closing down. So sometimes it is impossible. And what have we to do then? As Parkum, we are thinking about the right place for the preservation, for the conservation, for the presentation in a museum, for example. But we notice, together with the question, what has to be the future of the church buildings, we notice that there is a tendency to make of a church a museum. And we have to tell the question, we have to ask ourselves the question, has every church to be, can it be a museum? Is it relevant? Is it possible? And what do we have to do with the heritage that is there? So the work we are doing in the Abbey of Park, our own abbey, is a perfect example for our work we are doing in all Flanders. So that's our point of view from Parkum. Thank you very much and have a nice day.
I am Canon Ludo Collin. I am the rector of the St. Baaf's Cathedral in Ghent. And so I am responsible for the cathedral and all the pieces of art in the church, included the mystic lamp. But the altarpiece is in the cathedral since 1432. It was an altarpiece, so in one of the chapels in the choir. It was paid by a very rich family of Ghent, and every day there was a holy mass before the altarpiece till the end of the 17th century. But the altarpiece remains always in the cathedral as one of the most important things of the church. And during the period of the iconoclasts in the 16th century, it was the only altarpiece that was hidden in the tower. The rest of the cathedral was completely destroyed. It was always on the altar in the chapel of the family Weid, and in 1986 it was replaced in another location in the cathedral to protect it against violence but no one was very happy about the new location. There was no connection with the cathedral, and 10 years ago, when the restoration of the altarpiece began, we were looking for a new location so that the altarpiece was once again an altarpiece with a place in the church as it was always. But that was a big problem because we had to protect the altarpiece, and it has to be placed in a how do you call it, a vitrine with climatization, and yeah, that was the biggest problem we had. The historical location was too small, so we put it now in the chapel of the Holy Sacrament, good protected, but now it is once again an altarpiece with the connection to the cathedral. A visitor center in the crypt of the cathedral with augmented virtual reality, and there we explain the history of the cathedral, the history of the mystic lamp, the restoration, but also the religious signification of the mystic lamp. But that's very difficult to explain to someone who came from another part of the world, that the lamp in fact is Christ. So we have to do it very easily and very in a simple way. Also to explain to the people that the lamp is the salvation is there for the salvation of the people. Yeah, that's very difficult. That's very difficult. Not only for the people coming from Japan but also for the people of Belgium. A lot of people of Belgium has no connection with Christianity. The Cathedral of Ghent is the most visited monument of the city of Ghent, but it's also the cathedral of the Diocese of Ghent. It's the main church of the city of Ghent, and we try to keep that so. We ask respect from all people that comes from all over the world to see the cathedral and to see the mystic lamp, but also we invite the people to respect the church as a religious monument. And we on several places in the cathedral, you can offer candles, and we also provide prayers in different languages in the cathedral for the tourists, and they take them. So we try to do it. The cathedral, every day there is an Holy Mass in the morning at 9:15, and on Sunday at 11, and then there is no visit allowed. So that's one thing we try to do. And when there is a holy service in the cathedral, the tourist cannot go around in the church. But it's not easy always. I think these matches can be used in other parts, but I think also that our problem is the problem of most of the important cathedrals all over the world. I was last week in Rome, and the big basilicas in Rome have the same problem. But there are two aspects. I think the church has to be very open to all the people that comes to see the church, but we can ask respect for our religion. When I go to a mosque, I go to a mosque with respect for the Muslims. So I ask the same behavior from all the visitors in the cathedral. Dogs or can go inside the cathedral. That's one of the problems we have several times a week. People with a glass of beer or with French fries can go inside the cathedral.
Hello. Yes, we are back in the studio now. Jan, you must be very proud on these two wonderful examples from Belgium. So now we are going to face the challenge to bring Jan in the room. I see Pilar on the screen. I don't know. Jan, could you please speak? I know that in the 21st century, there is a changing perception on religious artifacts, movable objects, being just for display in museums. As FRH member, Jan, how do you think FRH could contribute to the debate? And by the way, public and participants who are attending, please make sure to put your recommendations in the chat. We will gather them for the network and all of us to benefit from. So Jan, please, as FRH member, how do you think FRH should contribute to the debate? Go ahead.
Yeah, well, as you have seen in the two previous videos, there are different ways of acting with this problem. In the first video of Parkum, you see that there is a museum setting created within a site of religious heritage, but it's a museum setting, and they try to use the museum setting and the content of this museum and of the objects that are shown in the museum to establish a dialogue between the public that is attending the exhibitions in the Parkum Abbey and the objects and the living heritage, the heritage that's still living in the abbey, because it's still an abbey where priests are living, where monks are living, and well, they are showing, or Parkum is showing the treasure of these monks that are gathered through ages, and so this is one possible way of using this heritage to explain to people of today that are not aware anymore of the specific layers, different layers of this heritage. They are showing, they are explaining what is the meaning of this heritage, and within this context of the abbey. In the cathedral, you see another approach. Here, the object, the main object, the mystic lamp, is still part of the religious reality. So it's not only shown as a masterpiece, but is also a masterpiece with a significance in the context of this cathedral. And so the main discussion that is going on now overall in Europe, I think, is whether you show these masterpieces in situ in the places where they are made for, or do you take them out their habitat and show them in maybe better circumstances in the museum context? Because today we have other standards for conservation of these objects, and we the museal world is convinced that the museum context is the better place to show them. But you lose something when you show them in a museum. You lose the context, and you lose a kind of significance that is created by this context. And what can FRH do? FRH can show what is possible and show what is the advantage of one approach and what is the advantage of the other approach. And we can do that because we have a lot of experience going on in the membership. I think in each of the members of FRH is confronted with this problem, is looking for specific answers for that can be given to this problem. Answers that is that depends on the local situation, and so if we can exchange these experiences and look together, there is no one answer. I think there are different answers, but if we can inspire each other and see when, oh yes, here we have this experience in I don't know, in England or in wherever you have it in everywhere in Europe, and you can learn from it, then I think we can go to a better result and a better presentation of this religious heritage. And what is important, I think, is that what Parker mentioned, what Liesbet Kusters mentioned in her presentation, that is the idea of dialogue, talking to people, showing what is the wealth and the worth of this heritage, and then we can proceed, I think, and then we can continue to take care of this heritage that is so important for us as people living here in Europe. And we got this heritage from our ancestors, and I think it's our duty to pass this over to the people that are coming after us, and not leave it without care somewhere, I don't know, without care and without love and without attention for it.
Okay, thank you, Jan. Well, already also in the Estonian video, it showed very clearly that talking about it and creating more knowledge and sharing it, these youngsters that did this, they also told us that the community became more proud and more involved. So these were good ways of engaging people. And also the two examples of Belgium, as you say, Jan, sharing knowledge is learning and building up new solutions. So thank you for your contribution. I have one question to Jordi. Do we have any reflections in the chat or recommendations on how they think our members, FRH, should contribute to the debate of changing perception on religious artifacts? Is there anything? Because I learned, I'm so sorry to everybody, but I am not able to see the chat live. But I do know that there were a lot of recommendations in the first round, so thank you for that. Jordi, is there anything that springs out immediately now? Okay, there's one thing that everybody is thinking about. Should artifacts be centralized in museums, or are we more in favor of having them remain in situ? That's a big discussion, of course, when the in situ is under stress. So it's a big challenge everywhere. And I know that from the big museum in Italy, in Florence, they once decided, the director, that maybe to give back some of the artifacts to the religious sites in order maybe to steer more community engagement and so on. So these are big thoughts and big challenges we're facing. Thank you for the contributions. Thank you, Jan, for the intervention. And thank you, everybody, that, well, we managed. Thank you, Technics. We managed this one. Thank you. So let's move already to our last theme of today, retention and reuse of religious buildings. As you might remember from the 3 former hybrid events, a call for papers was launched by the conference committee. Today, 2 papers, abstracts, will be presented. The first one focusing on ecclesiastical cultural heritage, risk management and planning of prevention and regeneration, developed by a team of students working with our council member Andrea Longhi, associate professor in the history of architecture at the Politecnico di Torino, and presented by Giulia De Lucia. You saw a small glimpse before because they put the video in between of the 2 other ones, but you will see the full video now. And the second one presented by Rachel Morley, Director of Friends of Friendless Churches. She will present what she calls the safety net, giving us thoughts to think about. Please start the videos.
Churches are subjected to greater risk among 100,000 churches. The BCE-RPR Ecclesiastical Cultural Heritage Risk Assessment and Planning of Prevention and Regeneration project try to answer to these questions. The project was conducted for 2 years by the Responsible Risk Resilience Center of the Politecnico di Torino, promoted by the National Office of Cultural Heritage and Ecclesiastical Buildings of the Italian Conference of Bishops. The principal aims were to develop prompt procedures for the selection of most vulnerable churches, considering territorial concentration of risk, structural vulnerabilities of buildings, and their level of use and maintenance. Starting from information on territorial risk and census of churches, by using only National Open Access Database, the multidisciplinary team, including architectural historians, urban planners, and structural engineers, develop a procedure for acceleration of the top priority cases in a multi-risk perspective. The innovative contribution of this research is to provide managing body of religious heritage with a simple and prompt procedures, supporting decisions concerning maintenance, structural intervention, and the use of churches, by allowing spatial and time planning of activities in the short, medium, or long term. Thereby, the most important achievement is the inclusion of local communities in this decision-making process, and the involvement in the observation and care of their property, for which they are primarily responsible. Future research steps will involve the definition of practical experimentation for ecclesiastical communities. The principal task will be to understand how to develop participative process aimed at the protection of religious heritage against natural risk, always keeping in mind the absolute importance of prevention to improve community resilience.
Everybody, I'm Rachel Morley and I'm the director of the Friends of Friendless Churches. We are a very small charity working across England and Wales in the UK. We rescue, repair and reopen redundant historic churches. We currently have 60 buildings in our care, and today I'm going to be talking about perhaps an alternative approach and the way that we rescue these buildings, and I've entitled my presentation The Safety Net. So without further ado, so for me, the parish church is a time crash. It's a head rush of place. It puts our small lives into context. The parish church isn't like a castle or a pub. It's the spiritual investment of generations. Not only is it the spiritual investment, but it's also the artistic investment and the human endeavor. It's a community's greatest and continuing expression of itself across generations, across centuries. And for me, historic churches are the very essence of placemaking. So memory is a hugely important part of these places. Within them, it's collective and individual. So in these places, you can hear the centuries of faith in cold stone, and you can feel the slow passing of time. You can see it in things like this, in the porch step worn by countless faithful feet. You can see it on the greasy marks on monuments that people have touched time and time again, perhaps out of devotion, out of mindlessness, or perhaps just because they like the way it feels. So my organisation, the Friends of Friendless Churches, deals with redundant churches. These are churches that the church doesn't want, but the building goes on and its importance doesn't diminish. Within them, there's a deep sense of humanity, a concentration of shared human experience within their walls. These are places where people silently poured out their hopes and their fears. And in many places, these churches are the only monument to the lives of hundreds of people, the people that history would have otherwise forgotten. But the advice turned out from the 1970s, if not earlier, is that these buildings need a purpose. There's a fanatic and perhaps an obsession, a drive to find alternative new uses, to give these buildings meaning and relevance in the 21st century. We're told historic churches can become community centres, creches, post office, cafes, skate parks, climbing parks. This approach has been in practice for about 50 years, at least, and yet we're still having the same conversation. What do we do with all of these churches? So is this approach of finding alternative uses, is it actually working? Most of the activities that are currently undertaken by churches, they're not money spinners. Will the income generated from these new uses really be enough to support these buildings in the long term? And we need to really think about the long term. In England, 85% of civil parishes already have a village hall, and 54% of those village halls don't cover their costs. So why force a failing model on our irreplaceable built heritage? So in short, and this might be controversial, I don't believe that post offices and cafes and creches will be the saviour of our parish church. Now, of course, there will never be a one-size-fits-all model. Every church and community is different and will differ over time. But community use is not the answer to sustainability for hundreds of churches. And the reason for that really is that they just don't have communities. This is our church Pentlec in northwest Wales. So some of our churches are in deserted medieval villages, but the depopulation of other areas is more recent. So in the 19th century, industry boomed, and the move to industrial centres led to new churches and the abandonment and neglect of older rural ones. In 1801, 20% of the population lived in cities. By 1901, that had risen to 75%. Even today, a fifth of all of the churches in England are in places where only 0.3 of the population live. This is our church Sutterby in Lincolnshire, which is in a deserted medieval village as well. So there's not a great community to be engaging with there. So we, the Friends of Friendless Churches, as I mentioned in my introduction, have 60 redundant places of worship in our care. We take on more every single year. Some of these churches are lively and they have a thriving community presence, such as this one, which is Papworth St Agnes in Cambridgeshire with a lovely fair, a redundant tower at Lightcliffe and Halifax outside Leeds. But whilst these places have a thriving community presence and people are interested in them, other churches just don't have that. But those churches are equally important. I don't gauge the importance of an ancient historic church on the number of people using it at this exact moment in time. People always come and go, use always ebbs and flows, but the importance of these buildings, this place carved out in the landscape, does not diminish. As an example, in many cases, our churches are built in oval or circular churchyards in pre-historic pre-Christian settlements. So this indicates that humans have found meaning or attached importance to that site for thousands of years. And I really love that continuity of place. And for me, that's worth saving. And for me, it's not good enough to say that because in an 18 or 24 month use seeking period done by a diocesan officer or a church commissioner caseworker, that it isn't possible to find an alternative use or devise a convincing business plan, that this long history of a public place, public space, comes to an abrupt end. I began by saying how the parish church is not like any other historic building, but we assess them and their futures under the same criteria and the same parameters as any other historic building. I feel as a sector, we are commodifying our places of worship. We argue and encourage that they should survive because they are an economic good, rather than a cultural or spiritual or artistic good. And for me, we've got our priorities all wrong. But not only this, but I really do feel that this approach is dangerous. In 2015, the English government gathered a group of experts, and in late 2017, they issued a report, the Taylor Review, into the sustainability of churches and church buildings. This report was the first of its kind by the government, I believe, but it didn't really offer more creative thinking. One paragraph, which I've got on the screen at the moment, talked about the non-viable churches. This was the word used by the Taylor Review to describe rural churches that don't have an obvious community or future. It went on to say that the majority of non-viable churches won't be sent into the care of the Churches Conservation Trust, the church and state-funded organisation for redundant churches in England. It said nothing more. And this review that I had hoped would really get people thinking and talking about the most vulnerable places of worship in England, it just shut down the conversation in one short sentence. But I believe that the decline of churches has been a slow unravelling. However, COVID has brought things to a head. This is evidenced in the Church Commissioners of England recent consultation that makes deeply worrying proposals about the future of churches. Proposals that I believe would diminish the democracy underlying the closure processes and reduce the transparency and accountability of the church. In summary, this consultation and the proposals within it seek to make it faster and easier to close a church. It seeks to dispense of expert advice from bodies such as the Church Buildings Council and the Statutory Advisory Council, and they want to limit the rights of the public to object to reuse schemes. Dioceses in England were consulted and the numbers are in. The commissioners are expecting between 131 and 368 closures within the next 2 to 5 years. There was no such consultation in Wales, but I was on a recent call where somebody from the Royal Commission of Ancient and Historic Monuments in Wales estimated that the last church in Wales, the last Anglican church in Wales, would close its doors in December 2037. That's not that far away. That is kind of the cliff edge that we're facing. So in the rush and eagerness to find new uses, we rarely hear of the approach which is undertaken by our organisation, the Friends of Friendless Churches. And I believe this approach is inherently sustainable. And I do believe it could be the answer to, for many churches, many of these non-viable churches. So we repair and reopen places of worship, reopen the doors of places of worship, sometimes after decades of closure. We maintain them. Officially, this is called the monument approach. We conserve these places as monuments, but in what this means in reality is the building is protected. It is no longer threatened with neglect or demolition or sale for private use. It remains a public building, a public space. The church is open to visitors 365 days a year. They can be used for occasional services, but also for private prayer. Where there's a community, they can become community spaces. They can be used for events, fairs, concerts, workshops, you name it. But where there's not a community, or where interest or enthusiasm wanes, which happens, we are still there, still quietly caring and celebrating that place. Now, we do this on a shoestring. We are only guaranteed £120,000 worth of funding a year, and that is for Wales only. but we still manage 60 buildings and manage to take on more every year. So we are kind of active proof, we're 65 years old, that this approach can work and it isn't excessively costly. So I do think that this monument approach, I think it deserves more credit and more consideration and more support. It's not flashy, it's not exciting, it's a gentle approach. It allows future generations and communities the chance to interpret, to learn from, to enjoy and use these spaces. It's a safety net. And I want to close by just saying that in these churches, we have our greatest architectural legacy. We don't need to justify their continued existence. I think let's take the long view. Let's think in centuries and not just within our own lifetimes. So thank you very much for listening. Hello.
Okay, back in the studio again. Amazing, this sparkling energy from younger generations. Showcasing clearly the topic of religious heritage and its future is relevant, intergenerational and intercultural. Also, Julia showed clearly how important facts and figures and insights are. Therefore, I would like to highlight once again the study of FRH Inform, which was embraced by a lot of our members and they gave a lot of input. It created fact sheets of 28 countries and it is available on our website. You must have noticed we changed the studio setting, so now all of you can see Jordi Malarach, he's part of the team now. Jordi, because you're going to reveal the chat to us, so was there any interesting question for maybe Madina or anybody else of the panel? Please go ahead.
Yes. Okay, I'll try. Hello? Yes. So thank you very much to the audience. There have been very interesting discussions on the chat. So one question that stands out specifically for Madina is the question regarding the generational change, the urgency of this generational change, and that it requires actions in local development. And the question is, can we activate awareness about heritage and employment?
Very good question. There is indeed a need to create a sense of belonging among young generation. They are so much global now. They are chatting with people from the other side of the world, and they are just forgetting their own territories and heritage. So there is absolutely need to reconnect them with the society in which they are, and to create a sense of belonging, and also to make them create awareness among them about the heritage, the cultural heritage they have, which doesn't mean that they have to cut with the other global network that they have, but it's very important to enroot all our youngsters. And it's also very important to show that crafts professions, I'm talking of course always about the crafts professions, are opening many doors. Craftspeople today, the one who are working now, are so busy. Sometimes if all of us ask for craftsperson specialized in something, and most of them are so busy that they cannot do the work. They can do it in 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, because there is more and more demand, and less and less skills available. So there is indeed opportunity of employment for the future. So we have to show this, to explain this, to map these opportunities. They can integrate innovation, digital technologies. They can be very, very interesting and rich for their future. So we have to speak about employment for the future, yes, of course.
Okay, thank you, Madina. There was one question that also popped up, and as we are only with 3 in the room now, I might respond to it. Because how are retention and reuse be brought to the top of the agenda above demolition, was the question. Who needs influencing and how? Well, I must say it's an easy answer. We should stress much more that demolition is polluting. Religious heritage is a part of the solution to Europe's climate change challenges. Through the preservation and or extended use, it contributes to reducing urban sprawl, prolonging the physical service life of buildings and building paths, and supporting waste avoidance. But then, of course, there is many unused and unused and near derelict religious buildings all over Europe. In my country alone, I'm from the Netherlands, 1,700 will close. So, and we are facing this challenge. So we are also facing the question, what are the best ways to treat these buildings and bring them back into use? And so maybe everybody could bring their recommendations in the chat, because I think it is also, it's a challenge all over Europe. And there are different ideas, different cultures. We are all in the game together. And so maybe, Jordi, maybe you have any idea also how communities could be involved, or maybe better involved. We have a program how to raise awareness and so on. So maybe, what do you think how communities could be involved, and what could be the main thing that how they can be brought into the discussion?
Yes, indeed. There's a need to involve the local communities. Often it's the case that most religious heritage sites depend on volunteer organizations to support them. And so the local communities often comprise these volunteers. They often lack the technical know-how or professional know-how to correctly implement projects to improve their religious heritage sites or to safeguard them. So here's where the support of networks like FRH can come into play to connect them with other volunteer organizations, to connect them with professionals that can provide expertise on the way forward. And so that's, I think, the best way forward. And in terms of just reaching out to young people, FRH has done the Run for Heritage, the Jump for Heritage, all these activities reaching across Europe, involving young people, sports, physical activity, and the awareness of the rich religious heritage around them. And so, yeah, through these activities of FRH, we engage young people, encourage them to get outside, to learn about what's around them in their local communities, and hopefully there will be these volunteers that one day will be supporting these sites.
Okay, thank you. Well, I do know that there are a lot of students of, I think even of 15 universities all over Europe attending today. So we are really reaching out, and also skills development is also focusing on young generations. This brings me to the next speaker, Jennie Hawkes, chair of Working Group D, who will share the conclusions of her working group with us today. Next video, please.
We have now come to the end of our conference on continuity and care and safeguarding of religious heritage in all its different aspects. I am delighted, and I hope you are too, that this afternoon we have been able to look at and discuss the range of issues that Working Group D has been concentrating on since 2020. Coordinating Working Group D, whose work underlies this conference, has been a very enjoyable experience for me. We have been a diverse group of colleagues and have ranged over many issues which you have been able to look at this afternoon. Our written report will become available on the FRH website after this conference, as will the appendix that we have produced, which gives a number of links to useful websites or projects. However, in winding up our afternoon, I would like now to take you through the headline points in the conclusion of our report, which we believe are very important for all of us in religious heritage to consider. First, the crucial role of local communities in safeguarding religious heritage. We cannot emphasise enough the importance of local communities in all our work. Too often they can be sidelined, not always a good idea. Second, the importance of education and training, particularly for young people. Young people will be taking over from us into the future and need as much encouragement and enthusiasm as possible. Links with schools, colleges and universities are vital. Third, digital disadvantage, particularly in rural areas, hampers learning as well as everyday life for young and old alike. This is still a major issue and has been very evident during COVID-19 lockdowns. It needs consistent work to eliminate the problems. Fourth, a lack of trained craftspeople and artisans across Europe to carry out maintenance and conservation. This has come to the fore today. An ageing workforce, lack of training facilities and apprenticeships all combine to prevent European countries maintaining and conserving religious heritage buildings and their artefacts. Fifth, rural initiatives, particularly in southern and eastern Europe, in heritage skills training, setting up of apprenticeships, enterprises and tourism activities. We see from our work a real need for this in southern and eastern Europe, particularly in combining worship use with community use for wonderful but neglected buildings. What better ways are there to prevent the drift of young people from the countryside into major towns and cities than providing training and other entrepreneurial activities in their home areas? Sixth, ongoing dialogue with museums and religious buildings housing collections to make them more relevant and interesting for visitors. This is very important, as religious collections can lose their value and contexts. Better and more informative curation, loans from collections to churches for local exhibitions, and a working together with regard to young people are all ways to enhance the understanding of Europe's rich history. Seventh, the reuse of religious buildings that no longer have a purely religious function, together with a non-demolition agenda in line with European net zero policy. Often it is too easy to say let's demolish, instead of thinking imaginatively about other uses for a building. With pressure from climate change, demolition is adding to pollution, carbon dioxide emissions, etc. All of us need a radical rethink. Eighth, practical outcomes for FRH to take forward to help to build a sustainable future for religious heritage. Working Group D has a list of projects which we believe are useful and practical for FRH to start taking forward next year. There must be other projects which FRH members can bring forward for discussion and implementation. We need a wide pool of projects as possible to work from. Finally, Working Group D has forged excellent working relationships and looks forward to its continued involvement in maintenance and conservation, with the setting up of the projects that it has proposed. I would like to thank my colleagues for their hard and dedicated work, without which this conference would not have been possible. Thank you.
I'm pleased to present to you Ms. Catherine Magnant, the Deputy to the Director and Head of the Cultural Policies Department in the European Commission Directorate General for Education and Culture. Ms. Magnant is also the Head of Unit for Cultural Policy at this DG, and she was previously Head of the Commission Task Force of the European Year of Cultural Heritage, 2018. FRH is delighted to share Religious Heritage's contribution to the Conference on the Future of Europe, and I'm also pleased to welcome Ms. Pilar Bahamonde, the President of Future for Religious Heritage, who will do this digital handover of the document.
So, dear Mrs. Magnant, it is an honor to me and a pleasure to see you today as the new President of FRH, even only digitally. And long cooperation with you as a task force manager of culture these years, and all the support I know I'm very well aware of that you've been giving to FRH initiatives all through the European Year of Cultural Heritage, like the Torch, the Jump, the Heritage, and the Run, which precisely has recently taken place in my region, Cantabria, at the north of Spain, and soon will take place as well in Orihuela at the Mediterranean Spain. So FRH welcomes both initiatives of the European Commission to invite citizens to contribute and participate in the discussion on the conference of the future of Europe and the new European Bauhaus. It is a shared journey in which togetherness and cooperations are key. FRH as a civil society organization is dedicated to contribute to the discussion on the Conference of Europe and want to make the voice of religious heritage and the way how it could contribute to the future of Europe heard on behalf of its members. So considering the importance of this opportunity offered by the Commission and being a partner of the new European Bauhaus, we decided to to take the opportunity to bring in both topics into the discussion of our 4 hybrid events on living religious heritage, which focused entirely on continuity. So this resulted in 10 key findings indicating why and how religious heritage is a valuable resource for the future of Europe. A combination of the 10 findings will help to build social and cultural cohesion for all citizens. Religious heritage, as has been shown, must be an important part of this and is a valuable resource for all those working across cultural and heritage fields. In recognizing its full potential, religious heritage will be a strategic resource for shaping a more beautiful, sustainable, and inclusive forms of living together. Honestly, I cannot highlight any of the 10 key findings. I would like to highlight them to you, but you know, I simply can't. All the 10 of them are really strong, and religious heritage, its past, and its contribution to the future is a showcase of cross-sectoral cooperation, creativity, and innovation. COVID crisis, we all know that has shown that many topics are interlinked, and that the new thinking comes from breaking silos, just as the new Bauhaus movement did 100 years ago. So defining the future of Europe is not a one-day exercise. It is a continuous one, and it needs the revival of a cathedral thinking, a concept that stretches back through the centuries to medieval times, when architects, stonemasons, and artisans laid plans and began construction of the soaring, cavernous structures that serve as places of worship, continuity gathering spaces and safe havens. And well, since then, the concept has been applied to space exploration, city planning, and other long-term goals that require decades of foresight and planning, so that future generations can really enjoy their full realization. So in FRH, we are committed and convinced that religious heritage can be part of the far-reaching vision, well thought out blueprint that is developed today, and are committed to contribute to the long-term implementation in order to shape more beautiful, sustainable, and inclusive forms of living together. So my deepest gratitude for your support with the FRH Torch of Cultural Heritage Initiative, which outcome is gathered in this wonderful book in 2019 that you know very well. Mm-hmm. And of course, now many thanks for your willingness to receive this document that I hand over to you, that FRH is bringing to the future of Europe as a continuity of all the work we've been doing together. And this is about togetherness. So I wish we can keep working together and invite everybody to join us. And I also hope that we can shake hands physically in Brussels.
Or in Spain.
Or in Spain, yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. And I would like first to congratulate you on your appointment as President of Future for Religious Heritage. Congratulations, and I look forward to working with you like I've been working with your predecessor and the whole team. And also thank you for inviting me here. And of course, I very warmly welcome these new documents that you've produced. I've had a look at it, and it's indeed very, very impressive and you know, very focused with very clear messages. And I think it will be extremely useful. It's a great contribution to the reflection of the future of Europe, where absolutely religious heritage and heritage in general has a key role to play, you know, a key role for our identity, for defining our future based on where we come from, our roots, whatever our religion is or was, all that belongs to the inheritance of spiritual and the values of Europe. It's a pleasure for us to work with the Federation of Religious Heritage. We got to know each other during the European Year of Cultural Heritage, and you quickly became a pillar, a key member of our work, always bringing new ideas, new initiatives to the table. You just mentioned the Torch initiative, but I also remember ringing bells for peace, or Jump for Heritage initiative. And Jump for Heritage in particular, I like to mention now, because next year will be the European Year of Youth. So clearly, I'm sure that your campaign can be, very successful in that framework. And also your very original take on the way to involve young people will, I'm sure, inspire other movements, also beyond heritage, maybe. So thank you so much for your very precious, essential contribution to the work that we do on cultural heritage, but also to the conference on the future of Europe. And I look forward to continuing working with you. Thank you so much.
Okay, back over to the studio again. You've just watched how the 10 key findings showing religious heritage is a valuable resource to the future of Europe, having been handed over to a representative of the European Commission. And I specifically want to thank Catherine Magnant for giving us this recognition and time. Thank you, Jennie, the first video. I'm sure one of the projects you wish FRH to take forward next year is the project initiated by Torsten Krusen of the Westfälische Wilhelms Universität Münster on Cyprus, aiming to produce a report on abandoned religious heritage, including all the religious communities concerned, like the Orthodox, Greeks, Sunni, Muslims, Armenians, Maronites, Latins, and Jews. I thank you all on behalf of FRH once again for your attendance, interest, and inspiration. Let's stand together in helping to hand over this amazing religious heritage to the future generations and to benefit for Europe and the world. This is what networking and joining forces leads up to, being able to hand over these kind of messages and have the voice of religious heritage heard at the European Commission level. Religious heritage, in recognizing religious heritage full potential, it will help to build social and cultural cohesion in Europe for all its citizens. Religious heritage, as has been shown, is a valuable and inspirational resource. Thank you. Togetherness is key. Please feel free to subscribe to our free newsletter. Share your experiences, stories, and news with us. We will make sure it will be spread, and join us to have the voice of religious heritage heard in Europe and beyond. Do not leave us at this very moment, because we have a wonderful musical masterpiece of organ performance following up. And do look in the chat, because Logan is putting the link to the 10 key findings documents, which has just now been released. Thank you all for organizing this event. Thank you everybody for being with us, and let's go forward with the religious heritage and enjoy this wonderful musical performance from Belgium.
Het volgende is misschien wel een contradictie, maar we gaan een sonatine horen met het reuzenlied als thema.